This is Dr. Semir Osmanagić from Western Anatolia. I am in the town which was very well known during the ancient times, called Gordijev. And a matter of fact, right now I am under the second largest tumulus in Asia Minor. They call it MM tumulus. 1200 years BC, Assyrians defeated great Hittite empire. The new power emerged, ruthless warriors and their generals with very advanced military technology, using for the first time metal weaponry. They were so powerful and the Hittite era was over. That left some vacuum in this area of the central Turkey, as we call it today. So we had people coming from the east, Assyrians, from the northern borders through the Black Sea, and from the west, the Sea people. Among them, we had bands from southeastern parts of Balkan Peninsula, from Thracian kingdom. They were called Phrygians by the ancient Greeks. By the ancient Assyrians, they were called Mushki. What was their real name, we don't know, because from them, themselves, we don't have anything in writing. So, for almost 2,000 years, Phrygians were here. But only one period is considered their best and impressive era. And that was from 725 years before Christ to 675 years, during the best-known king, King Midas. Before King Midas reigned this area, his father came to this city known as city of Gordijev. At that time, it was not capital of the Phrygian Empire. The matter of fact, 20 years before that, the Phrygian kingdom did not have a king. It was vacant. So people went to the oracle of Telmissus or Telmessus. She was a very famous oracle because she was able to prophesy the future. So they asked the oracle what they need to do to get their king. Now, at that time, the oracle's comments, suggestions, and advices were actually important so much that people would always obey their recommendations. It doesn't matter if you would go to the oracle to ask for your individual destiny or if you would go to ask for the destiny of your state and kingdom. Everybody would listen what the oracles had to say. Of course, the most important one was the oracles in Delphi. Of course, people think that the traditions with the oracles started with the ancient Greece, which is completely wrong. That particular one, which later on was dedicated to the Greek god of Apollon, was actually 400 years older than the ancient Greek state. So going back to the Gordijev. So they asked the oracle what they need to do so they can get their king. And they were told that the first man who come to their city with the ox cart will be their king. And sure enough, the next day there was a couple of poor peasants who were coming on the ox cart to the city, and they named them the king and the queen. The guy's name was Gordius. So Gordius started kingship again. Well, wanted to remember and dedicate and show his gratefulness for the fact that he was named the king, he decided to leave his cart, his wagon, and what he did, he entangled them so good that you were not able to see the beginning or the end of this knot. Now, this knot became famous as the Gordian knot. And all the ancient world was talking about it. Additional reason was that the oracle said that the one who resolved this problem with the Gordian knot, who find the beginning and the end and finally did, get to the to the bottom of it, he will be the king of Asia. Well, the best time of the Phrygian kingdom lasted only 50 years, and when King Midas lost the fight during the war with the enemies from the east, he committed suicide. So after that, the rulers from the east were ruling this part, the Persians were coming, later on the Greeks and the Romans. Now, exactly 450 years later, the great leader, young Alexander of Greece, came, who would be known as the Alexander the Great. And he heard about the legend of the Gordian knot. When he came to the Gordian, at that time he was conquering this part of the Asia Minor, he was looking this knot, trying to find a solution. But it was done in such a beautiful way. A huge knot, beginning at the end, were somewhere in the middle. So there was no way that you could find them. And he was thinking, and finally, what he did, he decided to cut it in half. So he got his sword, striking it once. The knot was in two halves, and of course he was able to find those ends and the beginnings. That very evening, when they went to bed, there were so many storms above the Gordian. And Alexander and his advisors were saying, this is the sign that gods approve our act. And indeed, after that, Alexander the Great went on to conquer the rest of Asia Minor, then going toward Egypt, he became a ruler of Egypt, then he went to conquer the Babylon, the Persia, parts of Afghanistan, India, so he became one of the mightiest rulers ever. The year was 333 before Christ, and he finally resolved the Gordian knot. Now, this is considered a legend about the Gordian knot. And of course, the act what Alexander the Great did is considered a myth. What are the myths? The myths are based on legends. The legends are based on true stories. And mythology was so important to the people like ancient Greece, ancient Egypt. Why? Because that was the way to communicate with the illiterate people, to show them few basic and most important pictures on the murals, on the walls, on the vases, or in some texts. For example, Greek mythology, which is probably the most developed after the Egyptian mythology, had so many gods and so many stories, life-inspiring stories. For example, the stories of Prometheus stealing the fire, giving to the people, and then being punished. These are all myths. Now when we are thinking about the Gordian knot, if it was for real or not, so is this myth really based on the true story? We need to go to the documents. The documents from the East are not so reliable because they even do not mention the Gordian knot. But those from the West, from ancient Greece and ancient Rome, they do mention the reign of Alexander the Great. They do mention oracle, which was advising the people to choose the next king, the guy who first ride to the capital city on an ox cart. So Gordius is actually the historical figures, King Midas is historical figures, and this knot was a historical thing. Now, the next thing, when it comes to myths, we know from, let's say, from Cicero, from the greatest statesman from ancient Rome, that he was talking about this particular oracle in the first ancient city of the Phrygians. In ancient Greek, whatever major matter you have for your kingdom, you would go to Delphi, consulting with the oracles. For example, when they built one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, the famous Colossi on one of the Greek islands of Rhodes, Colossi of Rhodes, after very short time after they built it, a huge earthquake struck the island, and this huge colossi, this huge monument, was almost completely destroyed. The people from the island, they had a wish, a desire to rebuild it. The Egyptian Ptolemy pharaonic dynasty wanted to help them financially. So this is this particular colossi of Rhodes here on my t-shirt. So the legation of the island went to ask the oracles about the destiny of their monument, and they were advised not to rebuild it. They had the resources, they were advised not to, and they never did that. So I would say probably the both prophecies from the oracles here were truthful. How they chose their leader, and that the one who untie the Gordian knot will become the ruler of the Asia, which really happened 450 years afterwards. So I'm standing here in this tumuli, which is the second largest in Anadolije. It's huge. It is 53 meters in height. It is almost 300 meters diameter. It is about 500,000 cubic meter of material. It is considered the tomb of the great King Midas. They call it MM, Midas of Mushki. Well, when it was opened back in 1957, sure enough, the tomb has been discovered. As a matter of fact, another 60-70 meters from us, we can see that the chamber and the human bones were discovered. When they did the radiocarbon dating, it gave us a date of 740 BC, 15 years before the reign of King Midas. Mm-hmm. So even though this is the most attractive and the biggest in the Phrygian kingdom, it was not a resting place for that particular king. Maybe this was for his father Gordius, because this body was about 60 years old and rather short, about 159 centimeters, which basically match the height of the people in those times. So today we spoke about the myths and legends and the Gordian knot, and we can say, yes, there is a lot of truth in some of those myths. Dr. Semir Osmanagić from Phrygian Kingdom.